Hi there, welcome to the video, welcome back if you're a return viewer. I'm Kerry, you're watching the Christchurch Review of Books, and it is the very last day of August 2024, Saturday the 31st, if you were confused about what that day was. Last day of winter officially here, and we're about to dive into spring. Of course, if you're picky, astronomically, winter is going to last another 3 weeks, but who really matters? Weather has been improving here, a few really warm, mild days, but of course that's tempered by the really bad days. Anyway, what we're doing today is the monthly book haul, and this month is quite a bit of a haul compared to the recent ones. Felt a little wealthier because a kind of accident of timing. My final pay for my last job came through, and then a few days later I got the first pay for my new job, so I had a little bit of extra cash to throw around. And what did I do? I looked at a couple of used booksellers websites and found a few books that I had on various wish lists were available, so I grabbed them up. But before that, I had ordered this book, Scarred for Life, Volume 3, and it arrived earlier this month, and it was much anticipated, and I'm glad to have it in my hands finally. It's something I've been waiting for what seems like years. It probably has been years, literally. So the Scarred for Life books were a labour of love by a couple of guys, Stephen Brotherstone and Dave Lawrence, in the UK, and I think about 2016, 2017 they put the first volume out. It's all self-published and printed on demand by the folks at lulu.com. That's how you get hold of these physical editions. Go to that website and look for Scarred for Life. I might put a link down below. And the first volume basically covered all those TV, radio, books, movie, games, and things that people of a certain age, mainly my age, probably 40s, 50s, remembered from the 1970s, and all those things that seem really weird and strangely inappropriate to children that we actually experienced. And they kind of caught a bit of the zeitgeist. There's a kind of a movement, a thought thing, an idea about this, and it's sometimes called the haunted generation or hauntology or something. Certain generation of people feel, well, there's certain spooky, weird things in their childhoods, and the first book kind of captured all that, and it covered just the 1970s. The second book was Scarred for Life, 1980s, but they found they had so much material to cover that they only could cover, they decided to only cover really the television programs of the 1980s in the second volume, and that came out a few years back. I have done a video on both the first two volumes. It was done a couple of years ago now, and the video wasn't particularly great. I think I criticised them a little much for being very British-centric, which is unavoidable because they're written by British people about British productions in the past in Britain, or the UK as I should probably be calling it. And I actually got in touch with in the comments to mention that, and I like to reiterate, although these books are UK-based, UK-centric, I'd say a good 90% of the material covered in them were experienced beyond the UK shores. Here in New Zealand, at least, I do recognise and remember a lot of the stuff in these books. Now, for the material they had left over from the 1980s volume, they've compiled it into this one, Volume 3, and it is subtitled Pop Culture in the Shadow of the Bomb, and that's what the focus, the special focus in this volume is basically the later Cold War era, when pretty much all of us who were alive at that time had this kind of constant fear that nuclear Armageddon was going to take place. And I was, like I said, I'm in New Zealand, and even I felt that as growing up, we'd see the books and the magazines and the TV shows about nuclear war, it's going to happen tomorrow, basically, and all the horrors that would entail. And it was a bit of an existential fear, even to me when I was like 10 or 11, 12. I mean, I was really into the military hardware and aviation, rockets, all that type of thing. And as part of that, you kind of learned about the bad side of that and what could happen. And this book has a pretty special section on all that type of stuff and what it did to people of our generation. And of course, on the cover there is an image there from Threads, which is the archetypal nuclear war warning movie which came out in the 80s, which I eventually did see later on. I don't think if it did air here in New Zealand, I don't remember seeing it until it was on video, I think. Anyway, so that's Scarred for Life, and over the 3 volumes, I've massively improved the appearance. The first volume was a little oddly set out and hard to read, and I should say that you can get all the 3 volumes in as a PDF, a digital form, for a little less. And the first volume I found was easier to actually read on the PDF than actually the physical book, because it was crammed up and hard to read in the margins. But they've redone all their formatting for the 3rd volume, and it looks great. I think the PDFs are in full colour. The printed books are black and white, fully illustrated. I think black and white just for the cost reasons. So that's Scarred for Life, Volume 3, Pop Culture in the Shadow of the Bomb. It's been out for a month or so. I ordered as soon as it was available, and it arrived within 2 weeks from lulu.com. It's print on demand, so yeah, that is one I am about to dive into and read from cover to cover. So that is Scarred for Life. It's good to see them reach their final volume. They are apparently going to focus on different things now, but it was a good effort. And that was a ding from my phone because I forgot to turn off the notifications, so I shall do that now, live on air. Yes. Okay, do not disturb. Exciting stuff on these videos. Okay, so from Arty's in Wellington, when I had money to burn, I found a couple of books I'd always wanted to have a look at and never got around to, and they were on, one of them at least was on a Amazon wish list, and that one is this book, Bang Bang Bodhisattva. I was under the false belief that this was written by an Australian author. Turns out it's written by a New Zealand author, close to home even, and this copy from RTB's is actually a signed copy by the author being Aubrey Wood, apparently a local author. Well, local is in the other end of the country in Auckland, and this is a cyberpunk themed mystery with some type of noir PI existing in a cyberpunk world. I'm not sure I know a great deal about the author or the story really, but I know I had this on a wish list for about 2 years, and so when I found a used and signed copy available from RTB's, I grabbed it, and so that's it there. It is Bang Bang Bodhisattva by Aubrey Wood. Next up, another book which got a lot of publicity about 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. And it kind of led to a revival of the classical myths being retold in a kind of contemporary style thing. And authors like Natalie Haynes, I think, is one of the big names in that. And the other big name in that is Madeline Miller. And this is Circe. I hope I'm saying that right. Circe, Shirky, Suki, Suk. There's one of those words, names that you always read but never actually use in everyday conversation. I probably should have looked up how to say it. Now, Circe is a minor character, I suppose you'd say, in the Odyssey. Odysseus and his crew go to an island and they encounter Circe, and various things happen, and I think she turns some of the crew of the Odyssey into pigs or something. I'm struggling to remember my classical education there, and this is a story telling the events from her point of view, and Madeline Miller has created a backstory and things that we didn't see in the Odyssey, and that is the legend or myth or story of Circe. Like I said, this kind of launched a new craze, if you could call it that, of retelling the Greek myths in a kind of contemporary form, and it's become very popular, and a lot of authors are now jumped on that bandwagon. This is the one that really kicked it off, I believe. So that'll be interesting to read. Not sure when I'll get round to it, but it's glad to have a copy of it now. So the rest of the books here came from Reverie Booksellers, local one in Christchurch. I'm always happy to support them. They're not the cheapest, but they offer a great stock, and there's a lot of things that kind of caught my eye. So starting with this one, Angelmaker by Nick Harkaway. Another book I'd had on my wish list for a long time. Now, Nick Harkaway is not his real name. He is actually a gentleman by the surname of Cornwall, who happens to be the son of the gentleman with the surname of Cornwall, who went by the pen name John Le Carre. So writing obviously runs in the family. And this is an award-winning novel, which is a kind of I'm not sure if it's alternate world or alternate reality or slightly surreal Cold War kind of thriller involving mad scientists and a secret doomsday weapon which has to be stopped, and all sorts of escapades like that. It's a thriller, heist, escapade type thing. People seem to like this. It's got good positive reviews. And like I said, I had it on a wish list and never bought it in a physical form. So now I have it. So that's Angelmaker by Nick Harkaway. So running down the rest of the books I got from Reverie Bookseller, this one is Great North Road by Peter F. Hamilton. Now I suppose you could call it a fan of Peter F. Hamilton since the late 90s, when he was part of the kind of the vanguard of the revival of space opera, big sprawling science fiction stories, with his Night's Dawn trilogy, the first book of which was The Reality Dysfunction. I ate that up, loved it. It was a mix of science fiction, horror, semi-mystical stuff, dozens and dozens of characters, settings, planets, space hardware, weaponry, wars, and zombies. And that book led into the second book, The Neutronium Alchemist, and then the third book, The Naked God. And he had a way of making you really anticipate what was going to happen in the next book. You waited for months for the next book to appear, and you bought it on sight. And he continued on with a series of other trilogies or series. I kind of lost interest a little way. He kind of he was very prolific, and some of the series type of stuff didn't really appeal to me, and until I went back to him relatively recently in the last few years, when he put out this Salvation series, which was much improved, much better written. I found he has become a better writer over time, and the Salvation series were really good. He's writing more now, though I just quite can't keep up with him. But people have kind of been re-evaluating him online. He's not quite as popular. He seems to have got a bit of a reputation of being a little dodgy with wish fulfillment, sex scenes and that type of thing. So I'm not sure how he's really seen in general now. So that's Peter F. Hamilton. This is Great North Road. It's another science fiction story with police procedural detective type elements. I know this book. I've known this book exists for a long time. I've never really picked it up, but saw this second-hand copy at Reverie Bookseller, and look at the size of this thing. It is a massive tome. Leads me to believe it is probably a multi-part series which he ended up publishing in one book. I could be wrong, but look at this. It is an absolute monster chunkster. How many pages have we got in here? Let me see, 1,085. Now, not exactly light reading. I hope it rips along at a good pace. Hamilton, like I said, he can do the business. He can do the make your turn page thing, but he also can produce some clangers along the way. So hopefully this is a good one. So that is Great North Road by Peter F. Hamilton. Next up, Fawlty Towers. Now, if you're a person of my generation or older, or maybe a little younger, you will recognise Fawlty Towers. It was the British BBC comedy, first screened in 1976, which was I would be about 5 years old when it first screened, so I don't remember seeing it that young. It was endlessly repeated. There was 2 series made, and that's it. Then they stopped very wisely. John Cleese, obviously the star, the former Monty Python part of Monty Python. Sorry, I'm struggling for words. It's lack of sleep. Yeah. If you know Fawlty Towers, I don't really need to describe it. It's an anarchic comedy based around a small seaside hotel in England, and he plays a Basil Fawlty, a hotel proprietor, which is slightly mad, slightly distraught, slightly stressed, and all the hijinks. Do I really need to describe Fawlty Towers? Maybe if you've never seen it, if you're young. Anyway, this book by Graham McCann, Fawlty Towers, basically details the history of the show, how it came to be, how it was written, what the influences was, what John Cleese was trying to achieve, broadcast history, how it was received, and all that type of thing. So it's basically a potted history of Fawlty Towers as a TV program. It is one of those shows that's endlessly repeated, maybe not so recently on broadcast television here at least, but if you want it, you can get it streaming probably. I know you could definitely get it on disc if anyone still buys those. So that is Fawlty Towers. And of course, I loved this program when I was younger. British comedy used to be a much larger part of the diet in this part of the world, where television used to regurgitate that all the time, and not so now. It's one of those things you have to seek out. Anyway, so that was Fawlty Towers. Next up, more comedy. This is Tinkering, the Complete Book of John Clarke. Now, John Clarke is likewise another piece of my childhood history, really. When I was very young, in the mid to late 70s, John Clarke played a character in the media in New Zealand called Fred Dagg. He was kind of like a rural, salt of the earth farmer type who used to wear a black singlet, gumboots, and a hat, and he used this kind of as a vehicle of satire to comment on the issues of the day or just New Zealand society at the time from an angle which was unusual but very knowing. And as Fred Dagg, he had hit albums, hit singles. He was massively popular in New Zealand. He was part of our culture at the time, and then he disappeared. And John Clarke, who was born in New Zealand, had gone to Australia, where he basically repeated his success over again. He became a satirist, well-loved satirist and comedian in Australia. And I believe he died in 2017. I remember there was a lot of sorrow in the media about that. He as well as being in the media and television and radio, he was a bit of a writer, and Tinkering is basically collects a lot of his pieces that he wrote. He wrote personal memoirs, histories, essays, all that type of thing. His daughter has collected them together in this book, which came out not long after his death, so I hope that wasn't a shameless cash-in. He was a well-loved figure on both sides of the Tasman. I think one of the last things I remember really being impressed by him in the media was a television series called The Games, which I believe started a couple of years before the 2000 Olympic Games in Sydney, and he kind of did a thing similar to The Office or whatever, where it was the managerial team that was working on bringing the Olympic Games to life. And all the satire and irony and deadpan stuff you could find in that situation, John Clarke was bringing it to the fore. And after that, he became like a comedy partner with another Australian guy, and they'd mercilessly lampoon the news stories and politicians of the day. We didn't see a lot of that in New Zealand. You had to seek it out. A lot of it was very Australian-centric, of course, so it didn't mean a lot to us, but it made him massively popular, and there was a lot of sorrow when he died. So that's John Clarke, Tinkering. And I wanted to look at this book when it first came out, but I kind of had basically forgotten about it. So when I saw it at Reverie, I grabbed the copy. Next up, another famous comedian, Spike Milligan. This is the Compulsive Spike Milligan. This is a second volume they put out. They put out a book called The Essential Spike Milligan, which sold very well. So, as a shameless cash-in, they decided to put out a second volume. Now, sorry, my nose is starting to run. You all know that what happens then. So Spike Milligan, if you are unfamiliar with him, is I would like to say UK, but he was actually born in British-run India and never actually took up his UK citizenship, I believe. He ended up becoming an Irish citizen because he wouldn't take an oath to the UK royal family or something like that. Now, he was really a famous figure in maybe my parents' generation. Just as a backstory, I think he originally was something of a musician, and then he joined the army during World War II, initially stationed on the home front, but then he was moved to where he fought in North Africa. I think he was part of an artillery regiment. He fought in North Africa, then in Italy, and was part of the Battle of Monte Cassino. Look that up if you don't know about it, where he was wounded. And after the war, as part of the kind of post-war comedy movement, he teamed up with Harry Seacombe and Peter Sellers, both famous names in their own right, particularly Peter Sellers, and they became a part of a comedy team, or they became the comedy team known as the Goons, a very famous radio team in the UK, and it spread throughout the world. Definitely was heard here in New Zealand. I believe, like I said, my mother's generation were big fans of the Goons, and Spike Milligan wrote all the scripts for the Goons. And the Goons were kind of anarchic, absurdist, surrealist comedy team who kind of poked fun at society of the day in the 50s and early 60s, and they kind of pioneered the kind of off-the-wall random comedy thing, and they inspired people from the Beatles through to, of course, Monty Python, who inspired comedy, further comedy, and lead to what we have today, where we can have surreal, absurd comedy. It kind of all went back to the Goons and Spike Milligan. And in my lifetime, Spike Milligan had a different association. He, at one point, I think in the 60s, wrote a kind of pastiche of fairy tales called Bad Jelly the Witch. And this was recorded into a radio version. I can't remember if it was Spike Milligan himself doing the voices, but somebody very talented did. And when I was a child back in the 70s and 80s, every Sunday morning there used to be a session on one of their national radio networks where they'd play stories ostensibly for children, and would get the same old things. Sometimes they were Greek myth-basing, sometimes they were just cutesy things. But some of these stories became massively popular, and then the children could write in and request them. And the one that became huge in New Zealand was Bad Jelly the Witch by Spike Milligan. I think everybody of a certain generation knew the story, could recite it off by heart, and it was well loved. And every so often they'd put out a new edition of the book, and it would sell like hotcakes in New Zealand. I think they're still talking about making a movie of it or something, or if they already have. I know there's an animated version. So anyway, Spike Milligan was a massive name in New Zealand because of that. That's how I knew he existed. It was only later that I associated with the Goons. The Goons were repeated maybe in the 80s and into the 90s on our Radio New Zealand maybe, and it was a little dated by then, a little past its sell-by date possibly. Likewise, in the 70s, in 70s and 80s, there were a few television specials, solo television specials by Spike Milligan, weird, surreal, absurdist stuff, with a kind of mixture of how's your father, shock, titillation, and a lot of stuff that wouldn't really play today. But Spike Milligan continued to get wheeled out into chat shows and things until quite late in his life. I think he died in the early 2000s or the 1990s. Sorry, I should have done some research. I'm just doing this off the top of my head. And the other big aspect of Spike Milligan was that he suffered quite heavily from mental illness. I believe he was bipolar, or what they called at the time, manic depressive. I'm not sure the great distinction between the two, but he suffered quite heavily. And a lot of his weird surrealist stuff probably came from his experiences with mental illness. And he, likewise, as so many people with such things, he was a campaigner for social justice and basically fairness. And yeah, that he, like I said earlier, he refused to take his citizenship because he didn't believe in the monarchy and the UK government. And so that was Spike Milligan, and this book collects a lot of his writings. Probably not the best stuff because the essential Spike Milligan kind of covered all that, but this has a lot of the scripts for the goons with annotations on them, and poems and a few essays. And as I mentioned earlier, he did fight in World War II, and he turned that into a series of memoirs. I think the first one was like Hitler and my role in his downfall, and he did a whole series of books detailing his wartime service and later. And he wrote some novels, he did poetry, like I said, he did the children's stories. So he was a massively talented man, and that is Spike Milligan. I think if he was around today, he probably might be at the very edge of public taste. I don't think there's much an appetite with some of the kind of music hall type thing that he got up to. But anyway, so that is the Compulsive Spike Milligan from Reverie Books. And last one from there is this book, The Many-Coloured Land by Julian May. I'm not used to seeing it in this cover lots of the time online. When I've looked up this book, it's got a very 80s, early 80s cover. I think this book came out in 81 or something. And I've seen this recommended several times as a good start to a bit of a saga that the author Julian May wrote. And what's it about? It's about in our future, there's a bunch of characters. You can see I've done a huge amount of research, but I've often seen this book recommended heavily, highly praised. And it's the first of I think there's a sequel and then there's a second series. And like I think it's in the 24th century or something similar, and they find a portal that goes back to, I think, the Pleistocene era of ancient Earth, or maybe later, and a bunch of people decide, well, I don't know if they decide, they are exiled into Earth's past, and as they try to survive in Earth's past in the ancient era, they discover that there are actually one or two alien races that were living on Earth at that time, and they have a bit of a mix-up with them. Like I said, people have praised this one highly in the past, and this cover is new to me. I guess they reissued the series a couple of times, and this is one of the reissues. So that is The Many-Coloured Land by Julian May. I think the series is called Saga of the Exiles. Not sure how soon I'll get around to reading it, but like I said, it's one of those ones I've heard about for years, and so I was glad to finally get a copy. So that is all the books from Reverie Booksellers. Last book that arrived before the cut-off date, today being the 31st. I have got another book on order, Bob Mortimer's second novel, The Hotel Avocado, which looks very promising. But the last book to arrive, definitely before the cut-off date, was this one, the Bookshop Detectives, Dead Girl Gone. Now, this has been a bit of a publishing sensation here in New Zealand. These are New Zealand authors, and they're actually bookshop owners themselves. It is Gareth Ward and Louise Ward in a North Island town. And they've taken kind of advantage of the current trend of cosy crime thrillers, as typified by Richard Osman's Thursday Murder Club type thing, and everything that's kind of followed that. And this the IP pivot on this story is basically the people, they work in a bookshop and they solve a murder. So, and it's all supposed to be full of quirky bookshop humour, characters, and New Zealand humour, typically New Zealand humour and characters as well. People say it's really good. I want to read this one next just to catch the lightning in the bottle while it's there. So that is the Bookshop Detectives, subtitled Dead Girl Gone, which leads me to believe that this will be a series they're hoping to produce under the general title of the Bookshop Detectives. My powers are Dutch and incredible. So yes, so that is Gareth Ward, Louise Ward, The Bookshop Detectives. I will read this shortly and get back to you with the review. I need something a bit lighter weight and cozy to read at the moment, because everything I've been reading lately is heavyweight or well recommended and turned out to be disappointing. So I will eat this one up, I think. So there we go. So that is the... Sorry, my nose is running yet again. This is the last book I have to talk to you about. So we've reached the end of this little book haul. I hope you've enjoyed it. Tried to set up the camera in a different place today. Not sure how successful it looks. I've got a lot of angles and lines behind me on the viewfinder. Like I said, it is the last day of August. Things are chugging along here at Shea Kerry. The new job has its ups and downs. After, I've had a couple of weeks of like a euphoric honeymoon of after leaving the old job and settling into being a job, like I said in the last video. Little amount of things that I wasn't expecting to be doing have happened in this job, so I don't know. Still kind of getting to know the team there and learning about how we're going to get on. So anyway, I'll leave that there. My life will probably bore you. I hope it was the books you're interested in. So we've hit 31 minutes, so I'll leave it there. Have a good day, evening, morning, night, wherever you are, and we'll catch you next time.